In the early hours of July 9, 1943, under a sky lit by searchlights and the distant rumble of naval guns, the Allied invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, began. It was the largest amphibious assault in the Mediterranean to date, a meticulously planned yet inherently perilous operation that would determine the course of the war in southern Europe. British 8th Army troops, under the command of General Bernard Montgomery, landed along the southeastern beaches near Pachino, while U.S. 7th Army forces, led by General George S. Patton, struck the southwestern coast near Gela and Licata. The Mediterranean, a theater of both opportunity and danger, was about to become a crucible where logistics, strategy, and the human cost of war collided. The initial hours of the landings were a mixture of triumph and terror. Amphibious craft struggled through mined waters, while naval bombardments attempted to suppress German and Italian coastal defenses. The Allies faced not just entrenched machine gun nests and artillery batteries, but also the unpredictable Sicilian terrain. Rugged hills, narrow roads, and towns that had become fortified strongholds. Despite meticulous planning, confusion was inevitable. Radio communications faltered under the strain, and scattered resistance led to pockets of intense firefights. The men of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, advanced under relentless fire, their faces etched with exhaustion and determination. Meanwhile, Montgomery's British 13 Corps moved with cautious precision, wary of possible ambushes and the hidden strength of Axis forces. Yet even amid the chaos, the human element proved critical. Letters later recovered from soldiers reveal a mixture of awe and fear. Private James Collins of the 1st Infantry Division wrote, "We landed in the dark, and the hills seemed alive with shadows. Every step forward felt like walking into history, but also into an unknown danger." Commanders faced the same duality: tactical opportunity paired with logistical uncertainty. Supply lines stretched perilously over beaches strewn with debris, vehicles bogged down in mud, and units isolated from each other in the confusion of the initial advance. As the Allies pressed inland, the complexity of the campaign began to reveal itself. German and Italian defenders, including elite Fallschirmjäger paratroopers and units of the Hermann Göring Division, executed delaying tactics designed to slow the advance and sow confusion. These forces were well-trained, highly mobile, and surprisingly resilient, countering Allied assumptions that Sicily would collapse under numerical superiority. In towns such as Modica and Ragusa, rapid Axis withdrawals left behind signs of hasty occupation. Burned supplies, destroyed bridges, and cryptic messages scrawled on walls, hinting at strategic retreats rather than defeat. Allied intelligence began reporting gaps and anomalies that commanders could not immediately explain, raising questions about the full extent of Axis planning and coordination. Meanwhile, Sicily itself was a landscape of uncertainty. Civilians fled or disappeared amid the fighting, and partisan reports were often fragmented, contradictory, or suspiciously silent in certain sectors. The disappearance of entire villages from operational maps, some destroyed, others evacuated, added a layer of mystery to the already dangerous mission. It was as though the island itself was a living maze, testing the resolve, coordination, and intuition of the invading forces. Montgomery would later comment in his diary that, "The island is more treacherous than any enemy. One cannot conquer it merely with numbers or firepower." By mid-July, Allied troops had made significant progress, capturing small towns and advancing inland from the beaches, yet the victory was far from assured. The German command, under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, demonstrated an uncanny ability to anticipate Allied moves, conducting counterattacks and strategic withdrawals in a manner that kept the Allies off balance. Reports of sudden German troop concentrations, unexplained artillery barrages, and rapidly abandoned positions heightened the sense that the Axis was executing a plan beyond immediate comprehension. Every captured village, every destroyed road, every missing convoy became part of a puzzle that the Allies had to solve under the constant threat of enemy fire. The story of Operation Husky is not merely one of landing craft and gunfire. It is a story of uncertainty, human endurance, and the thin line between success and catastrophe. As Allied forces pushed further inland, they encountered not only the physical defenses of Sicily but also the psychological toll of a campaign fraught with unpredictability. Soldiers began to sense that each step forward could lead into a trap, each hill might conceal unseen foes, and each town could hold secrets vital to understanding the enemy's strategy. The first phase of the Sicilian campaign closed with tentative gains, a mix of triumph and unanswered questions. Allied commanders had secured initial beachheads, yet the island remained contested, and intelligence gaps hinted at unseen Axis maneuvers. As Montgomery and Patton contemplated their next moves, a lingering uncertainty persisted. What if the enemy had preserved reserves and strategies yet to be revealed? The Mediterranean was no longer just a battlefield. It was a stage of suspense, where every decision could tip the scales, and every shadow on the Sicilian hills might conceal forces capable of changing the course of the war. By mid-July 1943, the initial shock of the Allied landings had begun to give way to the grim realities of sustaining a prolonged campaign on Sicilian soil. British and American forces were pushing inland, but the resistance they encountered was far more organized and determined than intelligence reports had suggested. German and Italian forces, including the formidable 1st Parachute Division and elements of the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division, implemented a series of tactical withdrawals designed to slow the Allied advance, destroy infrastructure, and maintain operational flexibility. Their goal was clear: delay, disrupt, and preserve forces for a decisive counterstrike, should the Allies overextend themselves. The human cost was immediate. The U.S. 45th Infantry Division found itself pinned in the hills near Troina, facing artillery fire from positions carefully concealed in the rugged terrain. Soldiers described the hills as alive with hidden defenders, and diaries from the front speak of nights spent under constant shelling, wondering if relief would ever arrive. British troops moving toward Catania encountered similar obstacles. Mines, booby traps, and barricaded roads slowed progress to a crawl. Supply lines became tenuous, with trucks and convoys frequently ambushed, adding to the stress and uncertainty of the campaign. Every step forward was measured against the risk of overextension, and commanders faced difficult choices about whether to press an attack or consolidate positions. Amid this chaos, puzzling anomalies began to emerge. Reconnaissance units reported towns that seemed deserted despite appearing intact on maps. Civilians and local guides recounted strange occurrences, sudden disappearances, abandoned homes, and signs of last-minute evacuations. These mysteries suggested that German and Italian commanders were not only executing standard military maneuvers, but also employing psychological operations designed to unsettle Allied forces and obscure their true strength. Allied intelligence officers grew increasingly concerned that entire Axis units were moving in secrecy, leaving no clear trace, and that conventional reconnaissance was insufficient to predict their next move. The struggle extended beyond physical obstacles. Communication breakdowns between the British 8th Army and the US 7th Army created friction in planning coordinated attacks. Montgomery and Patton had differing approaches. Montgomery favored meticulous planning and consolidation, while Patton pressed for rapid, aggressive maneuvers. These contrasting philosophies were complicated by the unpredictability of the enemy and the fragmented intelligence available. In field reports, officers lamented the fog of war, noting that decisions often had to be made with incomplete or conflicting information, and that every misstep could be fatal. Amid the tactical uncertainty, small stories of heroism and tragedy punctuated the campaign. The 3rd Infantry Division encountered a village that had been evacuated in the dead of night, leaving behind supplies, livestock, and a few hurriedly buried bodies. Soldiers reported that the arrangement of the village suggested careful planning, almost as if the Axis forces had staged an organized disappearance to confuse the Allies. In one diary entry, Lieutenant James Harding wrote, "It was as though the village itself was a puzzle, every detail intentional, every absence meaningful. We could not tell if it was fear, strategy, or something else entirely." Meanwhile, intelligence officers were racing to interpret cryptic German communications and fragmented reports from local informants. They discovered that some Axis units had deliberately concealed their movements along secondary roads and mountain passes, leaving minimal footprints to mislead Allied reconnaissance. The result was a disorienting game of cat and mouse, in which the Allies advanced cautiously, never fully certain if the next encounter would be a small skirmish or a massive counterattack. The psychological toll on soldiers was significant. Uncertainty and vigilance became constant companions, shaping every tactical decision. By the end of the second week of July, the Allies had gained control of several key towns and established temporary strongpoints. Yet the battle for Sicily remained far from over. German and Italian forces had proven resilient, adaptive, and, at times, invisible, leaving behind an enduring mystery in their wake. Reports of disappearing units, unexplained delays in enemy engagements, and sudden retreats contributed to the sense that the Allies were only seeing fragments of the larger operational picture. It was a campaign defined not only by firepower but by the challenge of interpreting incomplete information under deadly pressure. The tension carried forward into August, as the Allies pressed north toward Palermo and Catania, aware that Axis forces were not merely retreating but actively manipulating the battlefield. Every town cleared, every hill secured, seemed to raise more questions than answers. Where were the main German reserves? Which roads remained open for ambushes? How many Axis troops had vanished without leaving a trace? In this theater of both overt and hidden warfare, the Allies learned that victory would not come solely from numbers or firepower. It required anticipation, ingenuity, and a willingness to confront the unknown. By early August 1943, the Allied advance across Sicily had reached a critical juncture. The capture of Palermo and the steady push toward Messina marked tangible progress, yet the campaign was far from straightforward. German and Italian forces, executing a carefully planned retreat, employed scorched-earth tactics, blowing bridges, mining roads, and leaving behind abandoned fortifications that hinted at both desperation and cunning strategy. It became increasingly clear that the Axis was not defeated in the conventional sense. They were adapting, disappearing, and reappearing in ways that challenged Allied assumptions and intelligence. The U.S. 3rd Infantry Division, moving along the northern coast, found itself facing the remnants of German defensive positions that had been abandoned almost overnight. Weapons caches were intact, yet the enemy had vanished, leaving behind only traces, discarded rations, hastily burned documents, and abandoned vehicles. Soldiers were perplexed. Lieutenant Robert Halsey wrote in his journal, "One moment, the hill is held. The next, it is empty, as if the enemy had walked into shadows." British forces moving along the Eastern Front encountered a similar pattern, observing sudden absences that suggested meticulous planning rather than disorganization. The Axis strategy was creating both tactical setbacks and a profound sense of unease among the advancing troops. In Messina, the scene was equally enigmatic. The German 29th Panzer Grenadier Division and elements of the Hermann Göring Division executed a controlled withdrawal across the Strait of Messina to the Italian mainland, leaving only the illusion of a fully occupied city. Engineers discovered deliberately sabotaged infrastructure, mines hidden in roads, railway lines destroyed, and coastal batteries rendered inoperable, but the soldiers themselves had vanished, leaving few clues as to their remaining strength. Reconnaissance reports noted that German units had used nighttime movements, camouflaged positions, and decoy installations to mask the scale of their withdrawal. The question haunting Allied commanders was no longer whether they were winning, but what remained of the enemy, and where it would strike next. This pattern of sudden disappearance and calculated withdrawal fueled a sense of mystery within the Allied High Command. Montgomery wrote in a confidential report, "The enemy's presence is felt more in absence than in action. Every empty village, every burned bridge suggests a mind at work, not desperation." Patton, meanwhile, urged aggressive pursuit, warning that hesitation could allow German forces to regroup and fortify positions on the Italian mainland. The juxtaposition of methodical planning and fleeting appearances made it difficult for Allied intelligence officers to accurately gauge enemy strength or predict the next strategic move. Compounding the difficulty were reports from local civilians and partisans, who sometimes observed German units moving through secondary mountain passes or disappearing into the dense Sicilian countryside. Some villages seemed almost deliberately evacuated, with signs suggesting that civilians had been moved in coordination with Axis forces, though the purpose remained unclear. Allied counterintelligence speculated that Axis command might be experimenting with deceptive operations, testing how much misinformation could delay or mislead the invasion forces. Soldiers on the ground experienced this uncertainty firsthand, often advancing into towns only to find the enemy gone, leaving a quiet eeriness that contrasted sharply with the violence of the beaches weeks earlier. Throughout the island, the logistics of the Allied campaign were being tested to their limits. Supply lines had to stretch across rugged terrain, often exposed to ambush or sabotage. The US 45th Infantry Division and British XXX Corps faced constant pressure to secure roads, repair bridges, and maintain communications while simultaneously tracking an enemy that seemed to vanish at will. Every operational decision required balancing the urgency of pursuit with the need to maintain order, avoid overextension, and anticipate unseen threats. It was a campaign in which the enemy's absence could be just as dangerous as their presence. As August wore on, the Allied commanders increasingly contemplated the wider strategic implications of a failed Sicilian campaign. Historians later speculated that had the Allies been repelled, the Axis could have used Sicily as a staging ground to threaten Malta, disrupt Mediterranean shipping, and delay the invasion of mainland Italy. Such considerations heightened the tension, as every town captured and every mile advanced became a test not only of tactical skill but of strategic foresight. Soldiers sensed this tension in the air. The knowledge that one miscalculation could allow the enemy to regroup hung over the advancing columns like a shadow. The retreat of Axis forces across the Strait of Messina was not merely a withdrawal. It was a calculated, almost enigmatic maneuver designed to preserve strength while misleading the Allies. Every abandoned strongpoint, every mined road, every burned bridge was a fragment of a larger puzzle whose solution remained elusive. As the Allies prepared to cross the northern and eastern hills toward Messina itself, they faced not just a physical challenge, but a psychological one. The persistent uncertainty of what the Axis might have left behind, what hidden units remained in the hills, and what surprises the next phase of the Sicilian campaign would reveal. In this unfolding drama, victory was visible, yet the specter of unknown danger loomed, reminding all involved that war often rewards patience, intuition, and the ability to anticipate the invisible. As August 1943 progressed, the Allied advance toward Messina became more than a mere tactical operation. It evolved into a high-stakes chess match across the rugged Sicilian landscape. Allied planners, now acutely aware of the enemy's capacity for strategic withdrawal and deception, began considering a chilling possibility. What if the Allies had failed entirely? Axis control of Sicily could have extended the war in Italy by months, threatened Allied supply lines in the Mediterranean, and allowed German U-boats to dominate crucial sea lanes, disrupting operations from North Africa to southern Europe. The stakes were immense, and the shadow of uncertainty loomed over every maneuver, every command decision, and every soldier in the field. German forces, particularly the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and elements of the 29th Panzer Division, had demonstrated a mastery of delay tactics. They utilized the island's mountainous terrain to set up choke points, ambushes, and fortified positions that forced the Allies to advance cautiously. Supply lines were repeatedly harassed by hidden enemy units, and intelligence reports often contained conflicting accounts of troop movements, leaving commanders with an incomplete picture of the battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Whitfield of the U.S. 1st Infantry Division noted in his after-action report, "We were chasing shadows. Every report hinted at a concentration that wasn't there, yet every step forward felt watched." These elusive operations exemplified the German knack for operational misdirection, creating an atmosphere of both caution and frustration. Amid the battle's intensity, unexplained phenomena added a layer of mystery. Entire villages appeared suddenly abandoned, with evidence suggesting coordinated evacuations by Axis forces. Partisan reports and local informants spoke of disappearances of small groups of Italian officers and German specialists, sparking speculation that some secret operation was in play, an effort to preserve strategic assets or obscure the enemy's next move. Allied reconnaissance teams sometimes discovered stockpiles of supplies and weapons caches without any trace of the units that had previously guarded them. These anomalies forced commanders to constantly reassess their understanding of enemy strength, highlighting the limits of intelligence in a fluid and deceptive operational environment. The Allied command grappled not only with logistical challenges but with the psychological strain of these unknowns. Patton, ever aggressive, pushed for rapid advances to exploit perceived weaknesses, while Montgomery maintained a methodical approach, emphasizing the importance of consolidating gains and securing supply lines. The interplay between these contrasting strategies created a dynamic tension that mirrored the larger uncertainty of the campaign itself. Both generals were acutely aware that the Axis could exploit any misstep, turning apparent success into a catastrophic setback. The what-if scenarios haunted briefings and war councils. Military historians later speculated that a failure in Sicily could have allowed the Axis to fortify southern Italy, deploy reinforcements from the mainland, and threaten Malta, a key Allied base in the Mediterranean. The US 7th Army would have faced delays in launching the invasion of Calabria, and British forces might have been forced to divert resources from North Africa, weakening overall Allied strategic positioning. These possibilities underscored the fragile balance of the Mediterranean theater, where one lost battle could reshape the entire campaign and potentially prolong the war in Europe. On the ground, soldiers contended with both tangible and invisible threats. Mines, booby traps, and hidden artillery positions posed daily hazards, but the uncertainty of enemy strength was equally pressing. Reconnaissance patrols sometimes returned reporting no enemy in sight, only for ambushes to emerge hours later in areas thought to be secure. This pattern of sudden appearances and disappearances left troops constantly alert, unsure whether the enemy was absent or simply biding time. In letters home, soldiers described the eerie sensation of moving through towns that seemed empty yet haunted by unseen watchers, a testament to the psychological toll of tactical ambiguity. Despite the dangers, the Allies made incremental progress, securing high ground and pushing Axis forces closer to Messina. Each town and hill taken revealed new evidence of the enemy's careful planning: sabotaged bridges, abandoned weaponry, and signs of rapid evacuation. These discoveries reinforced the understanding that the Axis withdrawal was neither disorderly nor desperate. It was a deliberate strategy designed to shape the battlefield according to German objectives. The Allies, while victorious in engagements, remained unsettled by the mysteries left in the wake of the retreating forces. By the end of this phase, the Sicilian campaign had become a study in contrasts: clear gains on the map, yet persistent questions in intelligence reports; visible victories, yet shadows of uncertainty at every turn. Commanders, soldiers, and planners alike faced the daunting task of interpreting partial information, anticipating hidden threats, and preparing for contingencies that might never fully reveal themselves. The island of Sicily had become a theater not only of war but of suspense, a place where the balance between victory and disaster hung on understanding the unseen. As the Allies prepared for the final push to Messina, the question remained: what might have happened if their momentum had faltered, leaving the Mediterranean under Axis control? The answer would determine not only the outcome of this campaign, but potentially the fate of the wider war. By mid-August 1943, the final approach to Messina had become a crucible of tension and strategy for Allied forces. After weeks of grueling combat across rugged terrain, soldiers of the US 7th Army and the British 8th Army faced a combination of worn troops, stretched supply lines, and an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. German and Italian units had effectively executed a fighting withdrawal, leaving booby-trapped roads, demolished bridges, and abandoned defensive positions designed to slow the Allies and sow uncertainty. Every step forward was measured against the twin hazards of overextension and hidden enemy action, creating an atmosphere of intense anticipation and unease. American forces, including the 3rd Infantry Division and elements of Patton's 1st Armored Division, were tasked with seizing high ground overlooking the Strait of Messina, vital for both observation and artillery control. These positions, however, were rigged with mines and hidden fortifications. Soldiers often reported the strange juxtaposition of meticulous preparation by the enemy and their sudden absence. A German bunker might appear fully manned one day and deserted the next, leaving only scattered supplies or hastily destroyed equipment behind. Lieutenant John Matthews, part of the reconnaissance platoon, described it in his diary. The ground was littered with the evidence of an enemy that had been everywhere and nowhere at once. You couldn't tell if you were safe or walking into the next trap. British forces advancing along the eastern coast faced similar challenges. Montgomery's 13 Corps maneuvered through the hills above Catania, confronting enemy artillery positions that seemed carefully calibrated to delay rather than destroy. Field intelligence suggested that German engineers had created decoy installations, redirecting Allied fire and attention while actual units withdrew under cover of darkness. The deliberate pattern of withdrawal reinforced the impression that the Axis forces were playing a long game, shaping the battlefield to their advantage while conserving strength for future operations on the Italian mainland. Yet despite the obstacles, the Allies demonstrated remarkable coordination and adaptability. Infantry, armor, and engineers worked in concert to repair roads, neutralize mines, and maintain momentum. Patton's armored columns provided a rapid reaction capability, ready to exploit openings, while Montgomery emphasized consolidation of gains and secure supply chains. This dual approach, combining aggressive action with methodical planning, ultimately allowed the Allies to tighten the noose around Messina. Nevertheless, the campaign's final days were fraught with uncertainty. Even as the city came into view, commanders could not fully determine which Axis units had been redeployed to the Italian mainland and which remained hidden in the surrounding hills. One of the most enduring mysteries involved sudden disappearances of entire German units during the retreat. Reconnaissance patrols occasionally encountered fully equipped positions with no defenders in sight, as if the enemy had vanished into thin air. Reports indicated that some Italian officers and local collaborators had also been moved or gone missing, fueling speculation that covert operations were underway. Allied intelligence officers struggled to piece together the full scope of Axis strategy, noting that what was visible on the map represented only a fragment of the enemy's overall disposition. The psychological impact on troops was considerable. Soldiers described the tension of moving through areas that appeared secure but could conceal hidden threats at any moment. Nighttime patrols became exercises in vigilance, and every abandoned building or scorched road raised questions about enemy intentions. In letters home, men spoke of a haunting sense that the island itself seemed complicit in the deception, with its jagged hills, winding roads, and shadowed valleys hiding more than just the enemy. The campaign was as much a test of nerves and intuition as of weapons and tactics. By late August, the Allies had effectively secured Messina, cutting off the Axis escape route to the mainland. Yet the victory was tempered by the lingering uncertainty of what had truly been left behind. Were the remaining enemy forces regrouping elsewhere, poised for counterattack? Which strategies had succeeded in delaying the Allies, and which remained hidden, waiting to emerge in the next theater of operations? These questions haunted commanders even as the cheers of victory rang out, reminding all that in war, every conquest brings new puzzles, and every advance is shadowed by the possibility of unseen threats. The Sicilian campaign, now drawing to a close, left a profound legacy of both achievement and unresolved mystery. Soldiers had endured extreme hardship, navigated treacherous terrain, and confronted an enemy whose strategies defied easy understanding. Commanders had learned that victory often required more than firepower. It demanded anticipation, ingenuity, and a keen eye for the unseen. As the Allies prepared to turn their attention toward the Italian mainland, the lessons of Sicily, the meticulous withdrawals, the disappearing units, the psychological and tactical deception, would shape every subsequent operation. The suspense of what might have been lingered in the minds of both soldiers and historians, a testament to the precarious nature of wartime strategy and the fine line between triumph and catastrophe. By the end of August 1943, Sicily had been secured, and the last Axis units had evacuated across the Strait of Messina to the Italian mainland. The Allied victory was both strategic and symbolic. It demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated Anglo-American operations and paved the way for the invasion of mainland Italy. Yet the campaign left lingering questions and mysteries that continue to fascinate historians. German and Italian forces had not simply retreated. They had executed a carefully orchestrated withdrawal, leaving behind signs of sabotage, abandoned fortifications, and strategically displaced units that confounded Allied intelligence. Every captured town and every cleared hill revealed the meticulous planning of an enemy who, in absence, had shaped the battlefield as decisively as in presence. The successful occupation of Sicily came at a high cost. US and British divisions suffered thousands of casualties, and the human toll of combat, disease, and logistical challenges weighed heavily on soldiers and commanders alike. Private diaries and officer reports reveal the psychological strain of navigating an island where the enemy seemed to vanish at will, leaving only cryptic signs of their passage. Lieutenant Robert Halsey of the 3rd Infantry Division wrote, "Every abandoned village, every burned bridge, felt like a clue left behind, as if the enemy were telling us a story in riddles we could barely understand." These enigmatic traces underscored the complexity of the Sicilian theater, where victory had to be measured not only by territory gained, but also by the intelligence extracted from the battlefield. Historians have speculated on the strategic implications had the Allies failed. Axis control of Sicily could have prolonged the war in Italy for months, strengthened the German grip on the Mediterranean, and delayed crucial operations in southern Europe. U-boats operating from Sicilian ports might have inflicted severe damage on Allied shipping, while the morale boost of an Axis-held Sicily could have invigorated the Italian and German forces across the theater. The Allied High Command recognized that the stakes of failure were immense, reinforcing the sense of suspense and near-miss tension that had characterized the campaign from the outset. Amid the victory celebrations, Allied commanders reflected on the campaign's lessons in strategy, deception, and human endurance. Montgomery's meticulous planning and Patton's aggressive maneuvering had complemented one another in unexpected ways, demonstrating the necessity of adaptability and cooperation under uncertain conditions. Yet even as the island came under firm Allied control, the psychological impact of the Axis' disappearing acts lingered. Soldiers spoke of the eerie emptiness of towns, the deliberate destruction of roads and bridges, and the hidden caches of supplies that had been left behind. Each of these elements highlighted the sophisticated operational thinking of an enemy who had, in retreat, left a trail of unanswered questions. The Sicilian campaign also revealed the interplay between intelligence, reconnaissance, and interpretation. Allied officers learned that maps and reports were never complete reflections of reality. They were fragments that required critical analysis, anticipation, and informed risk-taking. Reconnaissance units became crucial in identifying hidden threats and abandoned positions, while intelligence officers worked tirelessly to decode enemy movements and predict potential counterattacks. In this environment, uncertainty was as much a weapon as artillery, and adaptability became the most valuable skill a commander could possess. As the Allies prepared for the next stage of the war, the invasion of mainland Italy, Sicily remained both a triumph and a cautionary tale. The campaign had demonstrated the effectiveness of Allied coordination, the resilience of troops under extreme conditions, and the importance of anticipating the unseen. Yet it also served as a reminder that even a successful operation could leave a battlefield full of mysteries. Disappearing units, abandoned supplies, and the subtle traces of enemy ingenuity that might shape future conflicts. The Mediterranean, for the moment, was secure, but the specter of what could have been, had Sicily remained in Axis hands, continued to haunt strategists and historians alike. In the end, the story of Operation Husky is not simply about victory or defeat. It is about the precarious balance of war, where preparation, foresight, and courage intersect with uncertainty and chance. It is a tale of human endurance, tactical brilliance, and the elusive nature of information on the battlefield. As historians examine the operation today, they are drawn not only to the battles fought and territories gained but to the mysteries left behind. The invisible maneuvers, the unexplained disappearances, and the psychological challenges that define the Sicilian campaign. The island of Sicily stands as a testament to the complexity of warfare, a stage where every victory carries echoes of what might have been, and where the line between success and disaster is drawn in shadows.